Here we go, live on a Wednesday in Los Angeles. Mover Nation, welcome to the Call Your Landry Show. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, thanks for making us a part of your day. Wow, I have been preparing for this show all night, putting new graphics together and things of that nature. As some of you have noticed, I have changed the name of the podcast. It has officially gone from Moving Past Trauma to the Call Your Landry Show. So welcome, because here we are, and we are still Mover Nation, but it is a different format. I'm able to bring some better guests with just a slight tweak, and I'm always looking to improve. And as a good friend of mine says, never let temporary inconvenience get in the way of permanent progress. So I'm full of quips today. I have a fabulous guest for you guys today. Her name is Elizabeth Stout. She is the host of the Trigger Therapy podcast, and she's going to add some unique perspective. And, there was an article. Every morning I read the Apple News segment on my iPhone, and it is something. It is sort of my daily ritual is doing the Apple News. And last week there was an article that had come out that said, "Why is America so in love with the AR-15?" And it was a fabulous article, really breaking down the politicizing of gun control in this country. And this is something that I have interviewed survivors from the Las Vegas shooting, as you guys know, last year, and other survivors. But, I don't talk a lot about it. And I grew up in the Midwest, and guns are most certainly a part of our culture and culture in America. But something that I thought about, that I heard this week as well, was you're not right or wrong. You are either right or you are still learning. America, when it comes to gun control, we are still learning. And I think that is something that we need to come to grips with sooner rather than later. I'm Call Your Landry. Let's get into it.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in...
When I was 12 years old, my testimony sent my father to prison for murdering my mother. I decided at an early age that our trauma should not be what defines us. It's what we choose to do with it that does. I'm here to share my unique perspective on true crime, mental health, society, and popular culture, albeit with a slight sense of humor. I'm Collier Landry, and welcome to my show. There's the new intro, at least for now, when I have a little bit more than 12 hours to put it together and 400 things going. For those of you that don't know, I'm going to Obsessed Fest with Tara Newell, my co-host of the Survivor Squad podcast, and we are headed to Dallas, Texas in the morning, and I have been preparing to get t-shirts together and all kinds of things of that nature, and it's just mayhem. And as you know, we release new episodes of the Survivor Squad podcast every Thursday and Friday, so a lot of production, a lot of things going on. But my guest today is Elizabeth Stout. She is the host of the Trigger Therapy podcast. She is a Parkland survivor, and she is going to share with us her story, her activism, what she is doing, and we're going to have a very candid and common sense discussion about something, because as I said in the intro, America, on this subject, we are still learning. I am pleased to welcome Elizabeth Stout to the program. Elizabeth, how are you?
Well, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for hanging in there with the all the intro.
Thanks for squeezing me in your really busy schedule. I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, I'm so thrilled to have you on, and I'm gonna put on headphones so I can actually hear better, and welcome, and this is my audience. This is Mover Nation.
I love them.
And I am the Gunpower. So she is her last name is Gunner. She is, I believe, just gonna correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe from the Netherlands or Finland. and so she has a very unique name. So I remember reading it and thinking, are you a firearms person, or are you a? But no, her name is Gun for short. So I discovered you. Tara Newell introduced us. You're going to be on our Survivor Squad podcast, sharing a lot more about about. She's from Sweden. There we go. Um, Share her. You're going to share a different aspect of your story, but one of the things that you and I, when we initially discussed you coming on the program, was this article that I had read, and a very common sense approach to handling these issues in America. And you have started this podcast as your way of coping with what had happened to you. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your story and the activism you're working on, your podcast, and all those things.
Yeah. So I am from a city in South Florida called Coral Springs, and Coral Springs is directly beside the city of Parkland. So depending on where you lived, you could go to Parkland schools. And my parents had moved down to that area when my dad was transferred to Miami when he was in the FBI. And we picked this particular area because the schools were safe, because the area was safe. And so I had a really normal childhood. Everything was all good. I didn't really deal with any mental illnesses or anything like that growing up. I loved high school. I was really involved in everything. I was captain of the cheerleading team. I was editor-in-chief of the yearbook. I really challenged myself because I wanted to get into the University of Florida. And so my life was really good. And then everything kind of just changed on Valentine's Day in 2018. At the time, I was a senior in high school, and I was just accepted into the University of Florida. And it was a Wednesday, and it was a very normal day. And we had 8 class periods that were broken up into 4 different periods on different days. So on this day was a silver day, which is periods 1 through 4. And so second period that day, we had a fire drill, which was very normal, very routine. No one thought anything of it. And also on this day, a lot of kids got caught vaping in the morning. And so they had locked a bunch of bathrooms across campus. So by the time it's 4th period, it's the last period of the day. And I remember I had a classmate of mine who wanted to go to the bathroom. So she gets up and she goes, and we're in the 1200 building, which is the largest building on campus. It had 3 stories and it could hold about 900 students, and our school had about 3,000. So a large chunk of the population's in that building, and they only left the 2nd floor bathrooms open. So I only know this because she left and she texted me and she was like, "Why are the bathrooms locked?" And I told her, "Kids got caught vaping, I don't know." And then she comes back, and 5 minutes later, we just hear gunshots. And it's about 2:20 in the afternoon. The shooting commenced at 2:21 p.m. and we get out at 2:40. And I used to go shooting. My dad was in the FBI, so I know those were gunshots. And I'm thinking, this is the most effed up prank or drill that we've ever had. Like, I was imagining like our assistant principal doing some terrible drill, because
Sure,
that just doesn't happen in Parkland. It's just like, no, it was just insane. And so he shoots into different classrooms. He shoots kids in the hallway. And then 90 seconds after the shooting had commenced, he shot into my classroom. And 4 kids were hit just because of where they were sitting. They were a little more exposed. And 1 girl was just shot in the head right then and there and was killed. And her name was Carmen Shentrup, and she was 16 years old. And she also was just accepted into the University of Florida. She's one of the brightest people I've ever met in my life. And she died in that classroom. And then 3 other kids, they survived. They pretty bad injuries. And we had kind of stayed behind my teacher's desk the entire time of the shooting. Some of us had like peeked and saw what happened to the kids. I never looked personally. I was just scared shitless, texting my dad and mom and everybody and saying my goodbyes. I didn't know what was going on. And so eventually we hear the police come, and by 2:43-ish, they are telling us to get out of the room. And because my teacher had called them over to say, "Hey, we need help." And they just said, get out and hug the wall on your way out, hug the wall, hug the wall. And so I remember looking down at the ground and there was just glass everywhere and just debris everywhere. And then once I get into the hallway, it was just so smoky and there was just bullets riddled in the walls, magazines on the floors, the laptop that the girl was using in the hallway was there. There was 2 dead kids there. And so we're trying not to step on glass. We really don't want to look at the bodies, but it's just like the Twilight Zone. It was just insane to walk out into this scene that is just an essential war zone. And I ended up running out of the building, and I had just waited for my dad to stop working, and we went home at 3:45 that day. And by the time I got home, he was like, Liz, there are for sure 2 people confirmed to be dead. And even though I had seen what happened in my classroom, I saw the hallway, it was just a very weird thing for me to hear because I was just at school and that was kind of like my second home. Like I was there more than I was actually at home. And
Sure.
so it was just very weird to hear that people died at my school. And to me, Carmen was just unconscious. I was like, she's going to wake up and she'll be fine and everything will be okay. But after that, I remember the next day they had all 17 names on the screen, and that was the first time I had just really cried and accepted what happened. And then from there, it was just really interesting healing journey.
I'll say so. That's, ooh, that's yeah, that's heavy. You know, I'm a few years older than you, but I remember, you know, Columbine had happened, I think either when I graduated or when I was graduating. And that's, I think probably the first time that I ever, I mean, that was 1997, right?
99.
90, oh, it was 99. Okay, then it was after I graduated, but I was in college. But I remember, you know, sort of trying to process being in high school because I grew up in a very small town in Ohio. And obviously firearms are present. People hunt, people do things like that. But I didn't grow up with this. And I was having a conversation with an FBI agent that I've interviewed on this program before, a former FBI agent. We were discussing the Idaho murders and with Brian Koberger, who was charged. And a lot of people are very quick to victim blame and shame. And I'm sure you know a lot about this, I'm sure. But a lot of people are very opinionated about people who are in the house not calling 911, not doing this, not doing that. And something that she very accurately pointed out, which I didn't even think about, was that this generation of young people has been raised being made aware that this could happen in their schools.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just like you said, a fire drill, like I would have fire drills, right? The way, like this is something that you practiced. I mean, you might not have practiced it in your high school, but it seems like it has become the norm for us to do a threat assessment situation. I mean, there was a movie where it come out with Mila Kunis last year, I believe, and she's processing that happening in her own school. But it's something I can't even imagine. You even mentioned vaping. I just got done watching Big Vape, that series on Netflix, and I thought,
Oh my God, I started that.
oh, it's fabulous. You'll love it. I'm gonna do an episode about it because I was stunned to find out so much about Juul, because I was always like, why is Juul become the scapegoat for this? I'm like, oh, once you watch and you get into it, you're like, oh, I see. You know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, as they say, for sure. But you know, those are things that I don't think about. I think about smoking in school. I think about fire drills or tornado drills. I don't think about an active shooter drill. How, because of all this happening, how do our young people cope with this, and how are our young people preparing themselves for what seems to be a norm?
I feel like I got out just in time because I think like the week before or a couple weeks before the shooting, we did go over. It wasn't really a drill, but it was like, hey, if anything happens, we need to go down this certain route. We need to go past these buildings, and this is going to happen. And I remember my AP psychology teacher, where I experienced the shooting, she was like joking that we're all going to run toward the window and she's going to push our asses out the window and we're all going to get away. And then eerily enough, when the shooting started, we all ran to the windows, but it was the complete wrong side of the room because he would have seen all of us and killed all of us. So we ran there first and then moved over. But to answer your question, it really sickens me to know that we need drills, because it's like we've just accepted that this is an inevitable problem in America, and that this is kind of like a band-aid to a really, really, really bad problem. And I haven't done any active shooter drills or anything like that ever, because I went to college 6 months after the shooting. But I do know that like the juniors that I was with in the classroom, when by the time they were seniors, they would have fire drills or they would have active shooter drills. And it was just, they were in full-blown panic attack mode. They were full-blown fight or flight, but the entire time they're at school. So you're not even getting your education anymore because you're not even present. You're not even internalizing anything anymore. You're there for just survival. So it's just like, I really don't know how. I can't even imagine little kids doing it. And like, I have little nieces and nephews, and I can't even think about them going to school or doing these drills, because it really sickens me that it's so normalized.
Yeah, I agree. I have 5 nephews. No nieces, 5 nephews. And yeah, how this is probably just part of life, just like growing up with an iPhone. I don't know what it's like to grow up with an iPhone, but just this is what it is.
Yeah.
Is this a problem? I mean, a lot of focus is on the United States and everybody, and I've spent I spent some time in Australia and over in Europe, and a lot of people are like, oh, America, guns, guns, guns. Everybody has guns. Everybody does. In Australia, everybody has guns. They just don't talk about it, right? And there's just certain types of guns they don't have. Is this do you think this is a uniquely American problem?
I think the polarization of it is, I don't think that mental illness is a unique American problem. I think mental illness is a universal concept that anyone can experience all over the world.
Sure.
And a lot of people in other countries are mentally ill, but they're not walking into their old schools and getting revenge on people or doing whatever their mission is, their suicide act, whatever they want to call it. That's not happening. And so I think that with our country, I don't think it's a black and white issue. I don't think it's either we need safer gun laws, we need more mental health. And I felt like that was the dialogue right after Parkland.
Yeah.
Especially in Parkland, like the actual community itself, it became very politically divided right away. And I think they both contribute to the problem, but I also think that there's an issue with the media and the way that we report it. Why are we showing his picture? Why are we showing his name? Why do we see his manifesto? Why we don't want to know anything about him, because people become copycats and they want to be the next school shooter. They want to get more victims next time. And it's just this weird competition game between these people that are so wounded inside, so mentally ill, and they feel like they can't turn to anybody, and so they just choose to kill.
And was that what this ultimately was? I don't know I don't even know this person's name. I just saw horror, tragedy, and of course, like as a child, as a victim of violence and homicide, I'm of course, I just remember finding out my mother was murdered and dealing with that in my school community, right? And when I heard that news, that's where my head always goes, is like the kids. But so they were publishing things that he had written, and was this, so he was a student there?
Yes. I went to middle school with him. I went to high school with him. He was eventually expelled just because he had a lot of behavioral problems. I think his mom was a drug addict when he was growing up, and I think she died from that. He never really had friends. He didn't really have like a family to turn to. He just didn't have anybody. And
yeah,
I'm not blaming anyone. That's just like the way the world works sometimes. But
sure,
he needed help, and it frustrates me because Broward Sheriff's Office went to his home so many times. And then he writes a comment on YouTube that says, "I'm going to be the next school shooter," which is tipped to the FBI. Nothing happens. Nothing happened with that tip. And I'm like, what? So it was just, there was a lot of moments where someone could have come in and say, "I am here for you. We have these resources. Let's figure something out." But I feel like even at like the Broward level, like that was our county, I feel like they played a part and failed. All the way up to the federal level, FBI played a part and they failed. And it's just a lot of people failed him, and then their failure in him affected all of us, that entire community, that entire school of 3,000 kids and all the faculty. And it's just, everything translates out, and it just sucks. It's just really sad.
That is terrible. And so you said your father's an FBI agent?
Yeah, my dad, he joined the FBI, I believe, in 1997, and was on like the drug squad, and then eventually was on the public corruption squad, and then he ended his career on the tech squad. He was also on the Miami SWAT team. He's gone to the most dangerous countries in the world, and that day, he said, was worse than anything he's seen around the world in his career. This really took a toll on him because obviously his kid was involved and his kid was shot at, and that's, no one wants that, obviously. But then also he gave his life to that institution, and for them to fail, they failed us. And FBI always touts about like this FBI family that they have, and we just felt like we weren't really in that family. And he had written leadership at the very top of the FBI, and no one ever really got back to us. For sure, agents in South Florida were there for us and checked on us and checked on my family, and especially a lot of retired agents, but like current leadership positions did not answer him. And then I think in like 2019, 2020, I believe like the guy right under the director was reached out and was like, "Oh, I didn't know your family was affected." My dad was like, "I've been trying to talk to you for the past 3, 4, 5 years. What do you mean?" Like, we moved out of that community. My dad retired. Like, we were truly grieving from obviously the shooting, but also just like the response afterward, just institutionally. And we just got out of that community because it was just time to go.
So obviously he felt like it was a colossal failure on their part.
Yes.
Wow. And did that ultimately, was that sort of like the straw that broke, that he was like, "I'm just done, I can't participate in this"? Or
yeah, he did not plan to retire that early. He retired in 2019. He was like in his early 50s, and we were just hurt. We were really hurt by all of that.
That's so terrible. I'm sorry. And it's got to be frustrating too when you are, as you said, he's in some of the most dangerous countries in the world, Miami. I'm sure the Miami SWAT is pretty heavy, pretty hardcore, heavy duty. There's a lot of activity that goes on through Miami.
Seriously. And he would be the guy that would be like the first one to go in. And so I'm like, that is the most dangerous job. Like, seriously, he gave his life to this institution that was just like, oops, we made a really bad mistake.
And did he feel that they had just turned their back on the investigation, or the community at large? Or
I think he just felt frustrated that his whole career they just talked about FBI family, and he just felt like he wasn't in it at that point. He was just like, okay, well, my family was let down, so I don't know what you're talking about, this FBI family. And there were a lot of people that were there for us and came to our house and gave me things and whatever, but it was very much a leadership problem that we were upset with.
Could you do me a favor? Are you on a laptop by any chance?
Yeah.
Can you just tilt the screen down just a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That way our eye lines match. Sorry.
Okay, good.
I'm like, I just want to ask her that. I'm a cinematographer by trade, so the visuals are always like, oh,
Oh, okay.
our lines are off, and I'm like, that's gonna make me crazy when I go to look at this later. Um, Thank you for humoring me. Um, that's uh, that's wild. That's, I have a friend who works for DHS, and and he was originally in Secret Service, and then I think he would moonlight a little bit for the FBI, DEA, and then he got into DHS for like the last 15 years. But some of the stories that I hear from him of just the overall, he has this great line that he says, and he goes, he he gets really aggravated when people talk about conspiracy theories in the government, because he says, the notion, the crux of a conspiracy theory is that people who are creating said conspiracy actually know what they're doing. He's like, they can't even get us a photocopier that works properly. The fact that the government can orchestrate something where it's just so like they're able to keep something secret is, it's like, it's utterly fanciful, man. So your father was frustrated with the perceived, I guess, incompetency or just lack of care.
Mhm.
But what about your peers? Like, how do they come to you because of your dad's connection to this, or did they like, how did this impact you?
I don't understand the question.
Well, when knowing that you're like, did people come to you to say, "Can you help us? Can you, because your father works in the FBI, can you help us, Elizabeth?" Do they come to you and like try to lean on you for support or for
Um,
answers in that way?
not not that I recall ever. No. I think I just remember after the shooting, directly after, like I just ran out and we were trying to find who the shooter was.
Mm-hmm.
That was my dad's job to find out who it was, him among other people. And once he found out who it was, he had just texted me, find a photo. And I was in this group chat and I was just like, someone pull out a yearbook right now and find a picture of this person and send it to me. That's the only thing that comes to mind when my friends come in the picture and my dad and asking stuff, but not that I recall, no.
Hmm. So the Supreme Court just this last week upheld this ban on ghost guns, which, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, ghost guns are obviously, it's what it sounds like, they're untraceable because people are able to do things like 3D print lowers to make firearms and things of that nature. Um, I I was given the nature of the Supreme Court recently, I was I was somewhat optimistic in seeing that, because I was like, oh, okay, there feels like there's some common sense thing going on when we're trying to really limit this, because we're in it. I feel like, as I said at the top, we're still learning, right? We're learning about the impacts of social media and how that affects mental health, and being able to have access to information like never before in human history, where you can literally get something offline and make it and use it, is wild. What do you think about the Supreme Court's decision, and what do you think about this ban on ghost guns? And is this something that you feel is a positive step?
I honestly don't know much about ghost guns. I remember what someone was telling me that like you could print the parts, and I was like, we have such a big problem.
Yeah.
Um, so don't know much about them. Am surprised that the Supreme Court did that. But while you were talking, it just made me think of, yes, society is rapidly evolving, especially in terms of technology, and institutions like the Supreme Court or just regulatory offices, just DC in general, is just not keeping up with how quickly society is evolving. And I think that is probably one of the root problems. And then you get into the conversation of like everyone in Congress is old and
It's
outdated and what.
TikTok or TikTok. They're on there, but seriously, your apps. This is what I wanted to get to. It's they have a very anachronistic way of thinking and doing things, and
Yeah.
it's like things are moving so fast nowadays. I'm a big technology person. I've always been a big technology person, but sometimes I'm just like what you can do what? And we've seen, even, and I don't know how, if you're into true crime or anything like that, but there's been, obviously this Idaho case is one of them.
Mhm.
There was the Murdoch case. They called it the first iPhone murder trial, because they were able to pinpoint. And then you have the Delphi case with the girls using Snapchat and all of this technology, which is, I mean, unfortunately, there's a loss of life, which is horrific. But also, because of these young people, or anyone taking advantage of this technology, it is helped to ensnare these perpetrators in a way that they might get away with it before.
Yeah.
But I do worry about the tech and the effects of the tech, the social dilemma, if you will. Another great documentary, if anyone's curious.
That was a good one.
Yeah, but also very scary.
Yeah.
Because in the wrong hands, people are able to exchange information in a way that we've just never been able to do that before. And
Yeah.
even this, there's a lot of obviously trolling, and I get a lot of vitriol for sharing topics and discussing things. Tara gets a lot of vitriol from people. I'm sure have you experienced this as well when speaking out?
Oh, people have called me an actor. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I went to acting school, in case you didn't know.
And
That's a joke. I'm not an actor, and I didn't go to acting school.
an actor is in, as in, they don't. So are they in denial of what happened? Is it like an Alex Jones type of situation?
Yes.
Or
Yes. Right after the shooting, it was a lot of like the conspiracy theory people, and they were like, David Hogg isn't even real. And I and my family, I remember right after the shooting, we were just all over the internet all the time. And especially one of my sisters and my mom would just attack anyone that would like try to attack us, because it was just so polarized right away, and the community was just bickering. But it was just these random people. I have no idea who they were. And they said that my story was fake and I was an actor. And I just remember, I think someone answered, but yeah, people will just make shit up instead of believe that 17 people were slaughtered and 17 more were injured in a matter of 6 minutes.
See, that makes me really sad. And it makes me really angry. And just so you know, I was on a show probably about like 4 or 5 months ago, and people also wrote in the comments that I was making everything up, and people very astutely, that I was making up my entire story, and people very astutely pointed out, well, then how are they have footage of him at his father's murder trial if he's making the story?
Also, why would you make up that your mom was murdered by your dad? Like, who gets a kick out of that? Like, what?
It's very frightening. And so on that note, because this is something that I talk about a lot when discussing things like crime, and this sort of like arm's length way that we're able to keep things that happen in our society, or in violent crime, right? For example, I don't think I can, and I'm sure you cannot, and I would say the majority of people on this planet could not comprehend doing what that individual did, or somebody who does something where they cut somebody up into plastic bags and put it in a suitcase and dump it in a river, and like their ex-girlfriend or something, just something that's so like, that is so extreme that we have a really hard time relating to that. And so we have no relation to the perpetrator. However, we all go to the grocery store. We all have children that go to school. Well, no, I don't, but most people have children that have gone to school, or we've gone to school. People go to movie theaters. People live their daily lives. People engage with dating websites and apps on the internet and on the phone. And when these things happen, they hit so close to home. There has to be this guard, this wall that people put up with it. Oh, she must be an actor. Oh, he's making it up. Oh, his mother probably should have left his father earlier. Like, there has to be this barrier for them to separate themselves and be like, well, that could never happen to me. That could never happen to my child.
Yeah, that makes me think of the conversations around bullying, and that my school shooter did what he did because he was bullied. And quite frankly, my next door neighbors were saying that, well, the kids shouldn't have bullied him after what happened to me and my family. And I think my dad had just like pulled out the video footage from my classroom and was just like, say that again and watch this. What are you talking about? That he did this because he was bullied. Like, I haven't talked to that kid a day in my life, but I was shot at. Like, why could it be my fault or anyone's fault that he was bullied? I was bullied in middle school. I didn't shoot anybody ever. Like, I don't, people just come up, you're right, with these barriers because they cannot comprehend how abhorrent and traumatic the event was. And so it's just like, oh, well, maybe this will justify it, or this is why this happened. It's just like, it's so surface level and superficial, and just like, until it happens to you, you just don't know.
There has to be a reason. There has to be a reason. You know, I did a TED talk about this. Like, you know, when people go through trauma or extreme tragedy, they go from why, like, why did this happen? They're really trying to evaluate it. And then you have, as a friend of mine put it, the keyboard cowboys or the keyboard commandos that sit in the privacy of their home and just write and will say anything. You're an actor. It's all a work of fiction for the I mean,
yeah,
it's mental.
Yeah.
But it does feel like there has to be this justification. Well, I mean, no rational person on earth says, okay, I'm bullied, so therefore I'm going to go commit mass murder.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't happen. And there are people that have been victims of mass murder that don't choose to live that. They don't go and reciprocate it. It's not an eye for an eye. It's not like, okay, well, I was done this, or now let's level it up because I was so injured by being. It's people's rationales are very hard to understand, and I think that, you know, I was talking to somebody about in an interview like a couple weeks ago. We had both been through these, and much like you had been through these horrific circumstances, and I said, you know, I wouldn't change anything about who I am or what I went through because it's made me the person that I am. I would change it for other reasons. I would change it for my family. I would change it for my community. I would change it for my mother, of course. I would change it even for my father. He didn't do these things, right? But I wouldn't change it for myself because I genuinely like the person that I've become, and it's empowered me to share a message and be out there in the world, right? But I said to get to that point where you are able to say that is a whole other level of consciousness. And it's like, if you know, you know, right?
When did you get to that point?
I think it probably hit me. I think it actually hit me pretty early on. That I realized at a very early age that if I didn't get a handle on this, it was going to consume my life. It was going to completely derail and destroy me. I had seen just. God, you just flipped this on me. I had seen. No, yeah. It's great. I had realized that at a young age and seen. I grew up in the town where my mother was murdered, right? So I never left and like went to a new place or whatever because I was abandoned by my family. So my family was like, you know, I was in foster care and then I was adopted after about a year, and to a wonderful family, and it was you know, thank God for that, right? By the way, shout out to my adopted father George. His birthday was yesterday. He turned 77, October 17th. Happy birthday, George Ziegler. Happy birthday, George Ziegler. Who's probably watching right now. But no, in all seriousness, one of the things I was able to see in the community around me, and I don't know how, but I saw how people lived with like regret, right? Mm. And there isn't like one, and you know, it's interesting you mentioned bullying, because I was just thinking about it yesterday. Every morning I go to the gym and I hit the speed bag and the boxing stuff and whatever. And I think about, like, you know, getting out aggression or whatever. And it's not really that. It's just I really enjoy it. It's fun. But I started thinking about like how I was bullied as a child. I was obviously bullied by my father, but I'm saying when I was a teenager, because of what happened to me, and I remember, you get stuffed into a locker. I was a big kid, you know what I mean? But like kids would pick on me because of what happened. But I remember thinking at that moment, like, what have they gone through that they feel the need try to stuff a kid whose dad killed his mom, and this is why you're doing this to him in a locker, or pick on him. Like, what have they gone through? And I think I realized that they didn't come from a background that I came from, which my mother taught me a lot about: compassion and grace, and sort of living in a way. And this isn't to sound altruistic, but like you're dealt a hand and you've got to play it. Like, it's just you got to deal with it, because if you don't, it's going to affect you. And that was the place I came to. But to answer your question, it started when I was a teenager, and it finally culminated when I made my film. Like, finally I hit because I knew that it was all leading up, but it's like, then you have that resolution, the curtain drops, and you're like, okay, that's done. And then you're like, hey, I'm going to start my life now. This is what I want to do. Like, I'm going to go start my life and live my life how I want to live it. And, I wonder, well, do you feel the same way?
I feel like I'm still dealing with it. Like, even with the podcast, I just remember when I was starting therapy and I was in college. Well, I was already in therapy, but I was in therapy, and I remember telling this one therapist I had, I was like, I feel so annoying. I feel so annoying because it's like, my entire social media is Douglas Strong. And I just feel like I'm always talking about it. I'm always thinking about it. And I don't want this to consume me. And I had this deep internal battle of the old Liz versus the new Liz. And I did not like the new Liz. I didn't like that I had PTSD and I couldn't control my bodily responses to fireworks or fire drills or even smells. It's just like, not having control really sucks, when I just felt like I was in control my whole life. And then suddenly now I'm in college, which is like the time where like you're really figuring out who you are and all this stuff. And so it's like, now I have no idea who I am. I don't really like who I am. And I just want to go back to who I was, which is impossible. And I feel like this year I really done a lot of good work in therapy, where I'm very proud of the person I've become. I'm proud of the podcast, but I'll still like go to bed at night and I'm like, do I talk about it too much?
Oh no, I hear
and
you.
I don't think I'll ever, I don't know. I think it's going to be like a thing I have to work on for a long time.
Well, I mean, I will tell you this, like, putting your creative energy into it, like doing a podcast is I mean, or whatever, speaking about it, whether it's TikToks or getting it out of you. I dove into art, right? And my processing was, I became a filmmaker, and I didn't talk about my story when I moved to LA. For only a very few people knew my story. And it wasn't until I made my movie, which is like 10 years later, the movie comes out, or 15 years later, and friends of mine are like, wait, what happened to you? Like, you told me your mom was killed and you were adopted, and that's all we knew. And they're like, this is what happened to you? This is you? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, I didn't want to let that define me. And now it's kind of weird because, you're talking about the going to bed at night and like, do I talk about this too much in this? Because I then, during the pandemic, like, oh, I should probably start a podcast. And then it took me a couple of years, and I started a podcast, and YouTube, where we're on now. And I started thinking, like, do I talk about this too much? Because for a long time, I was like, I don't want to let this define me. Then I went through all that processing. Then I made the movie. Then I'm like, okay, now let's talk about everything I just went through for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
I think that's something that you'll all. I've now come to the acceptance that that's something that's it's just chalk it up to the game. That's what it is.
I think what plays a part though is that there was 900 kids in that building, and everyone has a different experience and a different story. And so I always just felt like, oh my God, am I making this about me? Am I victimizing myself too much when there's so many other students that just don't ever talk about it, literally ever. They never post about it. And I would talk about that a lot with my other therapist that I had, and she would just try to tell me like, you are not them and they are not you, and everyone deals with these things differently. And I think I've definitely like understand that lesson now. Oh,
Yeah, that's Marisol. She is downstairs. She has her own merchandise. She has stickers.
she's vocal.
She is very vocal. Yes, well, that means that the Amazon guy is trying to focus. There we go. Those are the little stickers.
Oh.
Yeah, she's, and the Amazon people come up to see. What is it? 3 o'clock, 3:30, 3:45. Yeah, there we go. Um, yeah, so she's a 6-pound Chihuahua.
I don't even know what I was saying, but that's
Yeah,
funny.
there you go. Yeah, random. Usually she flies across the screen. I'm gonna get into a sponsor message really quick, and we'll get right back.
Okay.
Mover Nation, as you all know, I've been talking to you guys a lot about my travel plans and everything that's coming up, and how I have been using Next Evo Naturals Premium CBD to calm when I feel anxious and to help me with sleep. And let me tell you, I've been using the Triple Action CBD nighttime formula for about 2.5 months now, and my sleep has never been better. And you know, it is something that I as a consumer of CBD, I was not aware that there are premium and there's not premium. In fact, 60% of most CBDs in the market do not offer premium CBD, but you don't have to worry about that with Next Evo Naturals Premium CBD. Go to nextevo.com/MPT to get 25% off your order. That's nextevo.com/MPT. Link is in the description of today's show notes of today's episode. Now back to my guest, Elizabeth Stout. All right.
Turn on the lights, everyone.
Oh, you turn on the lights. I love that. Thank you. I was like, God, it got dark real quick.
Sunset so quick. I was like, oh God, I didn't plan for this.
Like the lighting started off, it was very nice. It was this like nice little golden hours, we like to say.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. And then it's, I was like, God, she's in a cave now. It's just the light of the screen. See, fabulous. It all works. There we were able to make some adjustments in the studio. It's fantastic.
Oh God.
I don't know what we're saying. I was talking about Marisol. She is.
I was talking about my internal battle. You know.
Yeah, the internal war, the war within, and you know, I mean, look, I got a few years on you, but I'm going to tell you, it is. I don't think it's something that's ever going to go away. And you know, I was talking to Tara, because Tara, obviously, who you've talked to and who you've interviewed. You know, she went through not a similar situation, but I feel like it's similar in a way of just being attacked, right? It's an attack, right? You're all of a sudden on alert. My situation was there was my mother's gone, and now there's an investigation that I'm involved in and trying to find out answers. So there was a longer processing. That was an immediate, like, I need to deal with this right now in this situation. And I said, you know, I because she'll talk about things that trigger her, and I'm sure you get triggered as well. You said fireworks, loud noises, things of that nature. I never think about being triggered, but I realize that I do get triggered. My neighbor downstairs will slam the door. They slam the door. I do not know why. They just slam the door all the time. And I'll be sitting here working, and it'll be 11 o'clock at night, and that door will slam, and it'll make me just jump up. And it reminds me, and I started working with this with my therapist. It reminded me of like my father, who had a very violent temper, rageaholic, slam the door, break the windows, etc., etc. And I started putting the two together. So, you know, I've got great news. I don't think it ever really goes away. I think you just become accustomed to it and you cope with it. And you do EMDR therapy, right?
Yeah, I used to. Yeah.
I've never done that, and everybody tells me I should check it out because they have amazing things to say about it.
Well, I feel like if you're like good, like EMDR was like, if I were to talk about the shooting and what happened, I would be shaking. My voice is shaking. I'm sweating. I'm crying. Whatever it is, I couldn't even talk about it. And then, yeah, if like a trigger happened, like the fireworks or something, and I would like jump out of my skin, I would definitely need EMDR, but EMDR sucked. You're lucky you didn't do it. But I feel like it would, I wonder what it would be useful for in your case. I feel like if you're still learning these triggers, I don't know how you could do it now. I don't know.
I don't know. I just it just it sometimes it's I don't like violence, right? I was attacked in 2017. I was jumped in Hollywood by five guys. Yeah, five guys. One of the reasons why I do the speed bag is the speed bag saved my life, having fast hands and then getting away, right? And I was half in the bag at the time, and too, so but I survived. I got busted up a little bit, but I was good. Like, because I woke up the next day and I was thinking about it, and I had posted something, and friends were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." I was like, you live to fight another day, right? Like, "Oh, why don't you go to the police?" No, I don't do that. Like, I survived, and I go on Google and I look at the same location where this was 3 months earlier. Somebody was stabbed to death, right there, same situation. And yeah, freaked me out. Hollywood's a dangerous place at night sometimes. And I thought to myself, oh, okay, that didn't happen. I'm still here. I'm good. I'm gonna call that a
Yeah.
win. Gonna call that a win. But I think I do often think about things being triggered and how survivors of violent crime. I can't imagine serving in the military and dealing with that level of PTSD. But EMDR, I probably, there's a lot of talk of psychedelics. People use psychedelics now and medicinally, and I remember back in my partying days, people were like, "Oh, you ever dropped acid?" I was like, I will never do that. I've heard people's hallucination stories. The things that I experienced as a child, I would not want to have those come back in my face in some weird trip for 8 hours. Like,
Yeah.
just that's something.
Yeah, no, I feel you.
So I wonder maybe if EMDR would be like that, because it's about like your sensory. It's all sensory, right?
Yeah, it basically all of like the memories that are stored in like your amygdala, and it's just your limbic system is where everything like the
Yeah.
fight or flight,
Yep.
all of that gets transferred to a different part of your brain where you can just tell it like it's a story, and that I just know it was a story from Valentine's Day in 2018 and I'm here in 2023 and I'm perfectly safe. Whereas before I would just never feel safe. So that's how EMDR helped me at least. But the psychedelic conversation is really interesting, because I work for a veterans research nonprofit, and a lot of the times when I hear about these like PTSD stories, or I'll go to a congressional hearing and they'll talk about their experience, it really parallels what happened to me and a lot of my classmates and a lot of the kids in my school, because a lot of us had really bad PTSD. And so I would find that really interesting. And so I kind of follow that. And the hot topic right now in research is psychedelics,
Yeah.
and especially psilocybin.
Yep.
And you hear these vets who have gone through and seen the most terrible things. And then they do this therapy with psilocybin and then they're cured. They're like good. And I wonder if
Wow.
in the 50s and 60s and 70s when they were doing this research and they stopped because they had to, I just
Yeah.
think about if they kept going, what the world would be like, and would we have all of these antidepressants and anti-anxieties, or would everyone just be taking psilocybin a couple times with a therapist and then everyone's good? I don't know, it's really really fascinating research.
I have heard stories, so I've done psilocybin before, and I was listening. I think it was the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, because he obviously talks about psychedelics and has for years. But I remember somebody talking about going on an acid trip like 20 years ago, and they were saying that they are still processing things from that trip and how it opened up these pathways, but they never they at the time they were on antidepressants. Yeah, I believe it was Prozac at the time. This is 20 some years ago, and they never went back on those after this acid trip, and they were just processing all these. It was a positive experience, right? But you think about some of these powerful plant medicines, like, I'm not going to go take acid, but you think about these powerful plant medicines that allow you to process things and see a different side. of the way that you've experienced things, and then how you continue to experience them in a different state of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a very valid point. Like, would we be shoving drugs down people's throats?
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely a challenge I experienced after the shooting. I did a lot of trial and error with a lot of different medications, and
Sure.
that just sucked. Like Zoloft didn't really work for me, and if that doesn't work, then we'll try something else. Oh, well, this medicine made me sleep for 15 hours a day, right? This medicine makes me really dizzy, and it's just like that was all my freshman year of college. Like I should have been like partying, having a great. I went to the University of Florida, like a huge party school, Florida Gators, and I was like crying in my dorm room every day because no one understood me, and my parents were 5 hours away, and
you're stuck in the swamp, and you're having a miserable experience.
Yeah, like alligators are walking by, and I'm like, I feel really dizzy from my Zoloft.
Also a great docuseries on Untold.
I think we watch a lot of the same stuff.
4-part. Well, so if it's on Netflix, I'm sure. But the 4-part series about the University of Florida, if you guys haven't seen it, about the Tim Tebow years and Urban Meyer, oh, it's fabulous. And I don't like college football. Fabulous, so good. I was like, wow, what a culture. I was like, this is amazing. And then like Tim Tebow is like this good guy, and he's like the leader of it's fantastic. So I mean, it's a bummer that you because that's a great school. I went to Ohio University and the School of Music there for a couple years before I transferred to another music school. But that was like the #1 party school in the nation at one time, voted by like Playboy magazine in like the 80s or something. So yeah, the college experience, to not be able to experience that, or to be coping with all of these other things. And I believe you said in your bio that it was like 6 months before it all hit you, right?
I went to UF 6 months after the shooting, and so that whole summer I had just crammed EMDR. I did it multiple times a week, and it sucked because it's exhausting, because all those sessions is you're walking through the story as detailed as possible. You're talking out loud to your therapist for an hour. She would let me go over sometimes, and I was doing that several times a week in the summer. And then I went to UF in August of 2018, and then really, really struggling, really trying to cope. March of 2020, they're like, go home and don't come back. And I was like, what? And then we didn't go back until next year because of COVID. So I really did not have a college experience at all.
Yeah. I forgot about COVID. Yeah, that would.
Yeah. But then COVID itself was kind of a blessing in disguise, because at that point, my parents had moved a lot closer to my sister and I to just be near us in case we needed them. And so I was able to go home quite a bit. And during COVID, I moved back home, and that was a lot of time where I was just able to like really calm down and just, I don't know, just like get myself back together. That's just the way it felt. And then at that point, after COVID, I felt a lot better, interestingly enough.
Is your sister older or younger?
I have 3 older sisters.
So how did they react to all this? You're the baby? Are you the baby of the family?
I am.
Wow.
So, well, all 4 of us went to the same high school, and Melissa graduated in 2005, Jenny 2007, Catherine 2016, me 2018. So we were all really bothered by this whole thing, obviously, but everyone kind of reacted in different ways. And I know when Jenny got the call that it happened in my classroom, she was at work and she just fell to her knees and was just crying at work, because there was also a period of time where I wasn't answering, and that had really freaked people out. And so I have a ring that says Grace Upon Grace, and I got it tattooed on my body.
Nice.
And it's just something that my sisters and I, it's just like our slogan, just because of that time period and everything being terrible. Yeah, if you have trauma, you probably tat it up everywhere.
I got all my tattoos after I made my film. So you'll see me in the film and there's no tattoos, and then all of them came after the film.
Yeah.
All relating to it. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, even my sister Catherine, she got a tattoo because of the Douglas thing. And I was like, you weren't even there, but
Right.
she really struggled in her own way too. And it's not just like, oh, this happened to my sister. A lot of it was them watching me become a different person. And it was like, where did Liz go? She's not her same witty, funny self anymore. She doesn't really talk that much. She doesn't really come out of her room. She's kind of mean now. And so it was like learning this new Liz and also grieving all of those kids that were slaughtered and all of the kids that were injured. And my other sister, she can't really talk about it, but she's really active in Moms Demand Action. So like everyone kind of finds what works for them. And everyone, it's been a learning process for everybody the past 5, almost 6 years in my family.
I mean, I was going to say that's wonderful. I mean, because it is wonderful that your family can, it's been a learning experience and it's been an experience together.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible that it took something like it's something about that. You know what I mean? But
Right. To like have that support system and that
yeah,
amazing family dynamic. I don't think I would have even healed at all. I don't even know where I would be if I didn't have my family at that time.
I'm sure, and I think that I'm sure that there are other people that were involved that didn't have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Very deep conversation, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm pretty deep sometimes.
Yeah. It's fabulous. I think people are just going on in the chat. I think they are they love this. Grace upon grace, powerful.
What are you reading? I can't read anything.
These are the comments. So I'll post some here. Oh, you should be able to see them.
Oh, that's my sister. Hi, Jenny. Oh, this is fun. I didn't know this was here.
Oh, Jenny Sorsey, this is your sister?
Yeah. What's up, Jenny?
Oh, look at this. How sweet. That's very cool. Did you tell her, or did she just discover this? She just Googled your name and it popped up on the alerts. And
I told her earlier today and earlier this week,
funny.
But wow, what a real one. Wow, I didn't know that this was here this whole time. Oh, what a great community you have.
They're fabulous, aren't they? This is Mover Nation.
Wow.
They are fabulous.
Cool.
And to even say hi to Marisol, do you see that? Everyone knows Marisol. She's a funny one. Elizabeth, where can my audience find you? I have links in the show notes, but
like my podcast?
Yeah, your podcast and all the stuff you're doing.
Yeah, the podcast is on Spotify, Apple, anywhere where you listen to your podcasts. And then the website for that is just triggertherapypodcast.com. And then all of the information that pertains to that is on there as well.
Fabulous. We will have all the links to Elizabeth's website, podcast in the show notes of today's episode, where you guys can click and check it out. Do you have some time for some questions?
Yes.
Guys, if you have any questions, drop a super sticker and or just a question. And Elizabeth seems to be very, very generous with her knowledge and time. Prometheus Predator does say the unconditional support of family is so important, and I would agree with that.
That's for sure.
Tam Jules says, I'm so glad you have a great support system, Elizabeth. So glad everybody's commenting on your family.
Oh.
And but I have been very lucky to cultivate a wonderful community here on YouTube, and it's fabulous. And in my podcast in general. So well, I don't have any questions that have come through. So Elizabeth Stout, thank you so much for joining the program. She is the host of the Trigger Therapy podcast, a true survivor and warrior for light. Oh, here we go. Do you say I love you more now than you did before? Tina Luffman wants to know.
Probably. Probably. I never really hang up on my mom without saying, love you, bye.
Yeah.
And Kathleen, yes, I knew Joaquin.
And Black Water says, I have no questions. I'm just in awe of Elizabeth. That's very sweet.
Really, really. I'm like overwhelmed with these comments. They're so nice.
Yeah, no, they're absolutely wonderful. Well, Elizabeth Stout, thank you so much for joining the program. It's been an honor to talk to you, and it's been fun. And I look forward to being on your podcast as well and having you on Survivor Squad.
I can't wait. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun, even though it was dark, but there was some light moments.
There is definitely light moments. We will be talking soon. Mover Nation, thank you all so much for tuning in to today's program. We got through it. Hey, I hope you guys liked the new graphics. I hope you loved my guest, Elizabeth Stout, host of the Trigger Therapy podcast. What insight. Very privileged to have her on the program. And I thank all of you so much. I want to say thank you to my channel members, my channel subscribers, my Patreon members. Thank you all for your support. Without your support, this program doesn't happen. And your support enables me to have fantastic guests like Elizabeth sharing their stories here with you guys, my community, Mover Nation, my audience. On that note, I'm Collier Landry, and this is the Collier Landry Show. I'll see y'all. This podcast is made possible by support from listeners just like you. For exclusive content around this podcast, please consider supporting me via Patreon by going to collierlandry.com/support. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and please leave us a 5-star review. If you want to see video episodes of this podcast, please check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/collierlandry. You can find links to additional resources in the show notes of today's episode. This podcast is a production of Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Collier Landry.